You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 323 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. And I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's great to be back, Jeremy.
Glad to have you back. You were on the road on assignment last week. We're able to take time to talk trade deadline and all the happenings. And good news, since last we podcasted, the Cubs are still awesome. And so we will get into all of the successes of the week that was. We will preview the week that will be. And to help us break down all things Chicago Cubs, longtime friend of the show, Matt Clapp. You know him from his work at the Comeback and Awful Announcing, and of course at the Blog Finds on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Matt Clapp, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on again, guys. I love it here.
And let's get into it. What a week. What a week for the Cubs so far. Pat,
Jeremy, can I just say one quick thing at the intro here?
Yes, please.
Doesn't it feel like the Cubs are more than 4 games over 500? Doesn't it feel like we're like 15 games over 500? It's so weird. I looked at the standings. I'm like, wait a minute. Where are all our wins? Because we win every series, but yet here we are. We're only 4 over 500. I feel like that's a misprint or something because I feel much better than the actual record indicates.
It tells you what kind of hole in the basement they were in, that they had to climb out of that to get into the basement, to climb out of that to get into a last wild card spot and be just a game or so out of first place. Matt, it's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah, it's been pretty wild. I think this ability was always there. If you looked at like the underlying numbers and the run differential and just the true talent of this team felt closer to at least like a 500 kind of team than how they were playing there for a while. And now they've taken it to a totally different level and they're finally matching all those underlying numbers. And I mean, Cody Bellinger is like an MVP level player right now. And Dansby Swanson has been everything that they could have hoped. I mean, he's been probably, I just tweeted that, I mean, he's the only defensive player right now in the majors that's both 13 plus outs above average and defensive runs saved. I mean, he's just been the whole package at shortstop. Jeimer Candelario has been exactly what they needed and everything they could have hoped for in the week since he's been on the team. Just deepens the lineup so much and gives them a compared to what they were getting from Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer and Matt Verse and everything. I mean, it's like getting a total superstar difference. You know what I mean?
Funny you should mention that, Matt, because I was looking at a box score from several months ago when the Cubs were in the doldrums when Bellinger was hurt, and the bottom of the order, I kid you not, was Hosmer, Mancini, Barnhart, Mastroboni. And like that was the bottom half of the lineup. And of course, we'd look at those lineups day in and day out and think, well, I mean, if you're an opposing pitcher, and the top half of the lineup was like Suzuki and Madrigal. I mean, it wasn't like it was all stars either. And I imagine an opposing pitcher would look at that and say, well, this is going to be great. I'll get through these first couple guys and then I'll cruise through, for an inning and a half or whatever. And you just can't do that anymore. It's just a much deeper lineup. The addition of couple guys really makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I didn't even mention Mike Tauchman. He's been like totally like Kenny Lofton all over again for them, basically just getting on base, like 370 plus on base percentage, hitting big homers. I mean, he literally won the game against the Mets last night. He's been doing that sort of thing a lot. He robbed a homer to win the game in St. Louis. I mean, he's just like...
That was a crucial game, too. That was the game that kind of propelled the Cubs into buy mode versus sell mode, right?
Exactly. Like, that was a, like, seismic play, really, in their entire season and, the franchise direction. And, I mean, he's just done so many things. Like, for a while, I waited for it to fall off, but now I just kind of am expecting him to stay like this until he's not. It's just been great baseball, and he makes their defense so much better in center field and right field. and allows them to put Bellinger at first base if they want to, and they can put Candelario at third base, etc. And I mean, he's basically, when you really look at it, he's basically replaced what they kind of thought they were getting from Seiya Suzuki. So that's what they have not gotten from Suzuki is definitely hurt, but in a weird way, they've kind of gotten that exact same production from a guy that nobody would have thought of 4 months ago.
Mike Tuckman.
No one would have thought of him.
Sorry,
Jeremy.
I was going to say post All-Star break stats: 363 average, 1.048 OPS, 4 home runs, 20 RBIs, a 12.6% K percentage, and 10.3% on the walks. So it's a pretty impressive numbers post All-Star break for like you mentioned, a guy who there's no way anyone had him penciled in as being such a key contributor.
I mean, Michael Tuckman, just to put it in perspective, is older than Trey Mancini and Patrick Wisdom, right? He is a year younger than Kyle Hendricks, 1 year younger than Kyle Hendricks, who we think of as being at the end of his career, right? After having a very long and prodigious career at the Cubs. And here's a guy who's almost the same age, who's going to be 33 in a couple months, and he's put up these numbers. It is pretty interesting. I was doing a little research on Tuckman because I'm like, how is this possible? And you know, he was sort of the Frank Schwindel, Patrick Wisdom of the Yankees back in 2019. He came out of nowhere. He was absolutely fantastic that year. I mean, he played about half the season, but he was, one of their best players and put up fantastic numbers, similar to what he's doing this year, even better actually than what he's doing this year. And then in the COVID year and the successive year in 2021, he kind of crashed, like a little Schwindel-like. And then he wasn't even in the majors last year, and now he's got this sort of second gasp here. So it just tells me that we'll see Schwindel next year in the second half with some team, probably the Brewers, put up some fantastic numbers. But it is a really awesome story for him to come out of obscurity, have a good season with the Yankees, and then go back into obscurity, basically be out of the majors, and then come back again, like as he has this year at the Cubs.
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. And, you know, maybe it falls off eventually or next year or whatever. But for right now, he's absolutely a star level crucial player for this team atop the lineup.
Well, and that's what good teams have. Good teams end up having those guys that have career years, and a couple of guys that have career years. When you go back to some of those, you can go back and look at some of those really good Cubs teams, and it's like, oh, Mark DeRosa had a career year that year that they were really good, and you need those kind of players, and Tuckman is one of those guys for the Cubs right now. As we look at last week, the Cubs take 3 of 4 from Cincinnati, and I think we were all pretty bullish on what the Cubs could do against the Reds at home. But then the Atlanta Braves came to town, and a lot of us were nervous about this series. This series was going to be a kind of a benchmark for where the Cubs were as an actual competitive team. Friday, they get blown out 8-0, and we ride the highs, we ride the lows, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a rough weekend. This is going to be a tough weekend, and to see them bounce
especially
back,
given the fact that the Cubs had no pitcher scheduled for Saturday. That's
right.
an unfair advantage for the Braves.
Right. The hope was basically that you could win the Justin Steele game, maybe,
yes.
and then maybe hopefully fluke into another game. But I mean, they flat out won on Saturday. Like they Assad gave them 4 decent innings, I think 2 runs. The bullpen did enough, and they just scored a lot of runs. Like they just flat out beat the Braves that day, and that was to me definitely one of the best kind of statement wins of the season.
We thought that if the Cubs could even win 1 out of 3,
Yep.
that would be like treading water. You know, you do that against the Braves, and then you come back and you beat up on the Mets and other teams. But that exceeded our expectations. And at the same time, the Brewers and Reds failed to meet expectations against weaker opponents. So it was a wonderful weekend for the Cubs in terms of gaining ground and proving that maybe they're not it's not impossible to imagine them competing in a short series against, one of the big teams.
Right.
And then off to New York, where so far at the time of this recording, they've split the games. They lost the Monday game, but won the Tuesday game. And one of these guys who's emerged for this team out of the bullpen, someone that we love on this podcast, Adbert Alzolay, he's now converted his last 11 save opportunities since July 5th. His 11 saves in that span are the most in the major leagues. I have so much joy watching Adbert Alzolay come in the ninth and close it out. He's got the closer mentality. He's got electric stuff, and I'm just so glad that he's emerging into this role, Matt.
Absolutely. I mean, as much as you say you enjoy all that, nobody enjoys it more than him. I
Yes.
mean, he absolutely eats this up. And he's like on Twitter, he's like the best teammate you can imagine. He's supporting and rooting for everybody. Like, he's a big fan and a big kid out there, basically. And he's been so good. Like, he's given up a little bit more hard contact lately, but I'm hopeful that that's just kind of a blip. And a big thing with him too is that he rarely walks guys. So if you give up like a solo homer here or there, or a couple of hard hit balls, that's going to happen. But you got to limit the free base runners you put on. I mean, you see so many high leverage relievers come in and can't throw strikes. And
I don't know. Craig Kimbrell was the Cubs closer. Did he ever walk anybody?
Yes, exactly. I mean, Carlos Marmol was the same way.
Oh, man.
It goes all the way back to like Mitch Williams,
right?
89, I think.
So,
the Cubs have a long tradition of this.
Right. And there are games, like we saw that White Sox game where he was just throwing like nasty two-seamers. And I mean, there are certain games that he looks unhittable. There's some games he's a little bit more hittable or this and that, but like I said, he doesn't really put on free base runners. And like, it would seem like a surprise if he ever just gets like blown up. You know what I mean? Like, he's just pretty steady, and especially if you have a 2 to 3 run lead, you're usually going to be in really good shape.
And frankly,
go ahead.
Having Alzolay on the mound is great, but having the middle infield defense behind him, since he does put some more balls in play, I think is helpful too. We saw that yesterday.
Absolutely. I mean, Dansby Swanson's hands and smarts just on full display to turn that game-ending double play. And yeah, it's just, like I said, it's so refreshing to me to see a pitcher that attacks the zone with conviction and doesn't give up free base runners. Nothing drives me crazier than when you have like a 4-run lead and you walk a couple of guys. Like, I'd rather make them earn it and beat you. And Adbert does that, and he's just been a godsend to this bullpen. And I'm fully buying on him being, if not like the long-time closer. I mean, I'm confident that he can probably be that, but he's going to be a huge part of this bullpen for a long time, I think.
Is this the same team that the Cubs had just 3 months ago? I don't recall a season where things have kind of flipped completely on their head. For example, 3 months ago, the Cubs couldn't hit their way out of a paper bag and the bullpen was a mess. But the starting rotation was like rocking it night after night, keeping them in ball games. I mean, they had that weird stretch where, if they gave up 2 or more runs, they lost like 19 out of 20 games or whatever. But they gave up, or they gave more than 2 runs, but they gave up less than 2 runs so many times they were able to stay, competitive. And now I feel like we're almost flipped on our heads where my biggest concern on a nightly basis is the starting rotation, because, thank God Jameson Taillon has come back the last month to pitch very well from where he was. But with Stroman struggling so mightily and Drew Smyly now seemingly almost unpitchable, and even Steele the last couple times out has not been quite as sharp. He's already reached his lifetime innings maximum. So, and we still have 2 months to go here, kind of, and so I worry about the rotation on a night-to-night basis and burning out the bullpen. And I look at our farm system, and I'm trying to figure out where we might be able to get some help from. But that to me has become the biggest issue, which it's so weird to have a team where in the course of just a couple of months, so many major aspects of the team can take a complete flip like this one has.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree that this is a team that has totally flipped their identity in season. I'm hopeful that they'll be able to outslug a lot of these teams the rest of the way, but I'm definitely worried about the rotation. And I mean, like you said, Justin Steele he's been absolutely incredible this year. He is a deserving Cy Young winner today, and I'm hopeful that the numbers remain that way for the next 2 months. But like you said, he's reached an innings maximum in his career. We don't know exactly how far he can go or if he can maintain this effectiveness. I mean, he's definitely been solid lately, but he hasn't been quite on that previous level where he was just dominating. So that's a big question. Marcus Stroman is literally not pitching right now, and he was a Cy Young looking pitcher for the first 2 to 3 months, and then he fell off hard, and he's been hurt now since, and we don't know, is he going to come back and is he going to be an ace-like pitcher? Is he just going to be someone that's decent, or is he going to be bad like he was the last several weeks? So that is a massive wild card that could go in either direction. Kyle Hendricks is a wild card himself. I mean, like, they're about to play game 3 against the Mets, and I honestly have zero idea. I could see him totally dominating, and I could see him getting rocked. Like, I think he's kind of going to be that guy, where he's going to be kind of situation dependent or stadium dependent. And Drew Smiley, like you said, I think he's kind of unpitchable from a rotation standpoint right now. The problem is that Stroman's out, and you don't really have great options, so maybe they leave him in there. But I would probably rather give Hayden Wesneski a try, and I think he's got at least some upside, and maybe he returns to what he was doing so well last year and in the spring. And if nothing else, you get more answers on him, and he gets experience. And then maybe Javi Assad has been doing so well too. He's probably been pitching over his head though at the same time. I honestly don't know what to do there. I would probably, like I said, I'd probably lean Wesneski just because I think there's a chance he does really well. And Smiley has just been so rough lately that I feel like that's just kind of a dead end right now, unless they really, really think he's going to turn something around. But there's not really a real answer there. And I mean, they got like 3 games coming up in Toronto, and that lineup can really hit. That series scares me just because I don't know if they're going to be able to, allow only a few runs on a given night. The good news, though, again, is they've been hitting the crap out of the ball now for the last several weeks. So maybe they can just be one of these teams that wins a lot of 8 to 7 games. Who knows?
Yeah, looking at the week ahead here, you mentioned Hendricks is pitching in the closer of the series against the Mets. And then we don't know, TBDs everywhere for the Blue Jay series as of the time of this recording. But
Steele will be in there somewhere probably, but that's
has to be. But man, it's let's just take a beat for a second. How amazing is it that we care about Cubs at Toronto in August? It's been years since we've had an opportunity to care about a series like this in August. This actually means a lot for the Cubs to continue their winning ways. This is going to be.
I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I'm kicking myself. If we had known this, we'd be there right now, right? 1 week for that series.
No doubt.
That'd be a fun series to go to.
One of our favorite towns, Toronto, absolutely would have been a really fun series to go to. Looking at the standings, the Cubs, as of the time of this recording, 59 and 55. They are at the bottom of the wild card race. Cincinnati right behind them, and they are right there behind the Brewers at only a game and a half against the Brewers, who are 4-6 in their last 10. So these games are crucial at Toronto against a really tough Toronto team. And Matt, I was just saying how excited I am to care about a series with the Cubs in Toronto in August. It's been years since we've had the opportunity to be watching meaningful Cubs baseball in August.
So I would say, Jeremy, and I agree with Matt 100%. I think the Cubs right now, their best options among a poor choice of options are Wisniewski, followed by Assad, because that's what they have.
Yep.
If the Cubs can get through this weekend in Toronto, though, I will say to people, things do get a little bit brighter, because next week they've got one of those weird weeks where they have 2 off days, Monday and Thursday. So if ever there was a time to go, I mean, ideally you'd like to, if you had 5 good starters, you just give everybody extra rest, but we don't. So maybe you use 4 starters and you give people a little bit of rest, but you get out of the problem of having to fill a couple spots in the rotation with hopes and prayers. And those 5 games that they do play are against the White Sox and Kansas City. So not exactly
And then
powerhouse
Detroit
teams.
and Pittsburgh.
And then
yeah.
Detroit and then Pittsburgh, right? So
it just keeps
so
it
in
keeps
a
rolling.
sense, you can get all the way to that Brewers series on August 28th. After this weekend, you've got this long stretch of 12 games where maybe you can kind of string it together pitching wise, and hopefully just stay above water and win those games, the winnable games. And then hopefully at some point by then we'll know more about Stroman and his future for the season, and we'll know, maybe whether or not Smiley is going to be able to return to his, if not April form, at least his historical form. And hopefully Teon will prove that, he's in a groove, and maybe one of the young guys will step up. It just gives you a little bit of extra time to figure that out as you go into the September stretch. And it couldn't come at a better time for the Cubs starting rotation.
Yeah, I think you basically want to get to that August 15th point where, you guys mentioned with the Royals, White Sox, Tigers, I think.
Yeah, Tigers and Pirates before you get to the Brewers. Yeah.
Like you want to just tread water, I think, ideally before that point. Or, you really hope that some of these teams will keep losing if you happen to fall on your face in Toronto, but basically you just want to hang in there until that soft stretch and then hopefully really, really turn it on. And like I said, the hope is that your offense is able to outslug some of these bad teams too, even if your starting pitching is having some issues. And then hopefully Marcus Stroman can return and be what he can be, down the stretch.
Yeah, the Toronto Blue Jays are currently also in the last wild card spot. They're third in their division, 7 games behind the Orioles. So these are meaningful, important games for Toronto as well. So this is going to be a tough series coming up this weekend. But like you mentioned,
and it's a good Toronto team too. This isn't like some, they're also 13 games over 500. So they've, as Matt pointed out, they've got some real bats in the lineup. But it looks like, is Bo Bichette still going to be out?
I saw that he was eligible to come off Friday and that he was making good progress, which would be,
of course.
Really,
so
really
there's 2 home runs right there. Yeah,
but,
yeah. My bad. Never mind.
Yeah, it sounds like it's uncertain. I hope they give him a couple extra days of rest. But yeah, he's one of the best hitters in baseball. So I got him and Vlad Guerrero Jr. They got Matt Chapman.
Springer.
They're pretty loaded. Yep, exactly. So, I'm trying to picture. I think Drew Smiley is currently slated for Sunday there, and I'm like trying to envision a world where that doesn't go terrible.
So but at least the Cubs will miss Kevin Gausman because apparently he's not pitching the series. He was one of our free agent targets from a year or 2 years ago when we really wanted the Cubs to go. He signed what's a very reasonable deal, as it turns out. But at least we won't have to face him. That's a little bit of indignity that will be spared.
And then, just hit that stretch, and this is where the Cubs can hopefully pile up some wins, get some separation as they head into the series against Milwaukee. And then all of a sudden, it's September, if you can believe it. And then September, there's a lot of games against. You've got your last opportunity against Cincinnati. You've got Colorado, a lot of Arizona, and then you still get to see the Braves and Brewers one more time. So still a lot of baseball to be played. So this stretch is key coming up to just rack up some wins and make up for some of those games that you let go. Some of those early season losses against the likes of the Washington Nationals and other folks that you wanted to see them be able to bank some wins against. So hopefully we can see that over the remainder of August. So it's very exciting. Very fun to be talking about meaningful baseball and not talking about prospects is the only thing to discuss when it comes to this
or even worse. We do live in Chicago, Jeremy, and as we've seen on the south side of town, it could get a lot worse in terms of teams completely imploding, both internally in the clubhouse and externally on the field. Oh my goodness!
It's what an unbelievable story that White Sox organization continues to be. Holy cow! That's I can't get
Between the
enough of
White
it.
Sox and the Cardinals imploding this year, it has been kind of a Schadenfreude extravaganza
Mm.
for
They're also
locals here.
they're also a cautionary tale of, I mean, you have these like rebuilds and how things may be set up pretty well, but you do not know that you're going to get more than 2 or 3 years of real contention. I mean, it's the Cubs and the Astros, the way they did it, that's not necessarily normal. And you have to have the resources. I mean, you got to give out more than a $75 million contract or whatever it is for Benintendi is your highest in
Yeah,
franchise history.
right.
I mean, you got to try really hard with it too, and you got to get some breaks. So I mean, that's why I always say, like, the Reds look like they could be a team like that maybe, but are they going to actually act like a big market franchise? Are they going to pay up Ellie Daily Cruz and Matt McClain and all those guys a few years from now? Like, I mean, you got to see it. So that's why I was also really, really hard on them for not doing anything really this deadline, because I think this is an opportunity that like Theo Epstein always said, that like every chance is sacred. And I mean, that franchise, to me, you're in the opportunity to go out and make like a move for a Giolito or Dylan Cease or I mean, even like a Jack Flaherty or something. And
Yeah.
they did like nothing. I mean, they got like a reliever from the A's, I think. I mean, I would be really angry as that fan base, just because you can think it's all set up well and you have all these prospects, but that doesn't guarantee anything, especially in terms of sustained success in a long run. So, like
The Reds look
everybody,
like they might finish 5 or 6 games under 500 at the rate they're going. Like they desperately needed an infusion of talent, like
Mhm.
you said, down the stretch, and they didn't get it. And good luck next year. Everything changes. People get
Yep.
hurt. Things happen. Yeah, it's a real cautionary tale, though. What you say about this whole, like, kind of, I guess you'd call it tanking or rebuilding or whatever you want to call it. Cubs and Astros did it very well, but also they were the first ones to do it. And now when you've got 10 teams doing it at all times, it makes it a lot harder. It's a lot harder to get the first or second or third pick in the draft when you're competing with 7 or 8, 9 other teams who desperately also want to be terrible. And
Right. And the lottery makes it much harder now too. I mean, the Cubs were
yeah,
lucky to fall into the second pick, and they were lucky that the Astros didn't take Chris Bryant. I mean, if
yes,
that didn't happen, the Cubs plan probably wouldn't have worked. I mean, that guy was literally the MVP of their championship season. So, yeah.
So, question for you, Matt, as we look for the week coming up here. What are the Cubs going to do here with Seiya Suzuki? What do we see? Is this just a slump? Is this he needs to be a platoon player? What do you think here going forward the Cubs should be doing with someone like Seiya Suzuki?
Well, The Athletic had an article about this a few days ago, and David Ross saying that they were going to sit him for a bit and kind of let him work on this behind the scenes. He's going to be in the lineup for Game 3 today against David Peterson, a left-hander. But I don't know if that's going to be like, if he's just going to be a platoon player or if he's just going to start here and there. Because, I mean, the bottom line is that Mike Tauchman and, I mean, even Nick Madrigal in the lineup give the Cubs a better chance to win right now than Seiya does with how he's played. He's actually played a much better right field this year, so it hasn't been anything there, and he's helped their defense. But, I mean, he's been a below-league average hitter, and, like, lately it's just been just somebody that looks totally in between and lost. Like, he pinch hit in their Game 1 loss, and it was the same thing where he just was like, he looks like he's guessing, and he's, like, half swinging, and his mechanics are all off, his leg kick and his arms are going a different way. And he's just a guy that is, I think, thinking too much and doesn't have that confidence at the plate. And his mechanics are out of whack. And it's just like all coming together to create this messy look for a guy who I don't think we've seen the best of him, like, personally, but I don't know that we're going to see it the rest of the season, and they need to win games. So it's like, it's a really delicate balance of that, where I think you got to probably play him against some left-handed pitching. I would still not bat him higher than like 7th if it was up to me until I see it looking better. and maybe you like play him over like Christopher Morel versus lefties or something. Morel's had his struggles there, but I don't know if it's going to get fixed this year because there's just not much time left, and it's a guy that's just looking like, I mean, honestly, kind of like a mess right now. He'll at least take some walks, and he'll probably run into a mistake or two, but like you can't really count on him with runners in scoring position at the moment. And like it's sad because I definitely think there's a legitimately good hitter in there. Like last year, he was I think 116, 115 WRC plus hitter with decent numbers. And when the season ended, like that last September, I thought that we were going to talk about him as maybe the best hitter this season. Like
he was our
even
breakout hitter of the preseason. You know, that we expected this year to take a step up. It seemed very logical.
I mean, his numbers even looked strong, like well into May, and it's just, I don't know. Like he is the like if they were where we thought they were going to be 2 weeks ago, and they were like 3% playoff odds and whatever, you play him through it, and I bet he starts hitting better. But I don't think they can afford to do that right now. So he may just not even get the playing time to really get into a groove. It's unfortunate because I really think he could help them. But like I said earlier, they're getting the same kind of production from Mike Tauchman anyways, and now they've got Jeimer Candelario. So I would probably limit his playing time unless he just really, really looks like a different guy sooner than later. They can bring him in like in games that are lopsided and stuff. You can bring him in late and hopefully gets a couple of at-bats that way. But I don't know about regular starting playing time anytime soon. But I still think that I still think he's going to have a good season with the Cubs. I don't know what it's going to be.
The good news, Matt, is he has 3 more years left on his contract, so he's got plenty of opportunities to have a good season with the Cubs. Just not the first 2.
Yes, and they're going to have to give him the opportunities because, I mean, they're paying him a lot of money, and there's a good hitter in there. We've seen that, so I don't know. And very worst case, he would be a platoon kind of hitter, and it would be an annoying use of money, or it wouldn't be living up to what they hope for, but he could still have use and still be a decent baseball player.
I think you can definitely draw a distinction between Suzuki moving forward and the likes of a Mancini or maybe even a Smiley, where you kind of look at their contracts for next year as sort of dead money. Like you can't, well, obviously Mancini is because he's gone, but even Smiley, right, you can't count on him for next year in any meaningful way. It would just be a bonus at this point if he does well. Whereas I think with Suzuki, there's still a reasonable belief that he can provide value. It's just, as you say, he's making a lot of money. So it's, he might not be earning back all that money, but certainly he has value.
Right. And they have so much talent coming on the farm with Pete Crow Armstrong and Owen Casey. And they have some guys that are going to push him for playing time, and they'll probably either try to re-sign Bellinger and or Candelario or maybe another bat. So there's going to be competition in there. And yeah, I mean, he's going to get his opportunity still, but for right now, I don't think they can really afford to do it unless he's really showing well, or unless somebody else.
At least he's not batting 3rd or 4th in the lineup. I mean,
right.
They've improved their lineup in a way that they can, I wouldn't say hide him, but they can certainly survive the seventh batter, performing like this versus the 3rd hitter performing like this. What is your take then on, as we move into September, do you think the Cubs bring up Mervis at that point? Does he play more first and Candelario maybe more third? Is there, or even DH? If Morel is against certain matchups where you don't want to use Morel, maybe use Mervis. What's your thought on that? Having another lefty bat in the lineup at times.
Yeah, that's probably just going to depend on their own internal evaluation of what they think he really is right now. Because, first of all, he was better. The StatCast numbers and all the batted ball data and all that was way better than his actual numbers were in the first stint. So I don't think he's that bad, but I also don't know if he's decent either. And by now they probably have a pretty good idea on if they can count on him or not, or if he's made the proper adjustments. I know that they said he was down there to make some real adjustments. My question on that would be, he's also not facing lefties throwing 95 with vicious sliders, or he's not facing this and this. So it's hard to really simulate MLB pitching, and there are a lot of guys that fall into that trap of being the amazing, the quad A hitters that are the amazing AAA hitters and then struggle with MLB pitching. I'm not saying that he's going to be one of those guys, but I also don't know how they view him right now. And again, they're trying to win, and they have Bellinger, Tauchman, Candelario, and all these other players that seem to be easier to count on at this point. So I would guess that when he comes up, I would guess that the usage is pretty selective, and probably not much different than Suzuki if Suzuki doesn't start hitting either. So that's just my take, because I think they're going to be in these races as long as they keep playing decent baseball. These races are probably going to go down to the wire, so they might not even really get a chance to play September guys like a lot of teams will. You know what I mean? The Braves and the Dodgers. Teams that are in the Braves and Dodgers position, or the teams that are well out of the playoff race, they're going to be playing a lot of young guys in September because they want to give some rest, or they want to see what the young players can do if they're a bad team. The Cubs might be in this situation where they're playing for their lives every day, so they might not be able to afford giving Mervis playing time. I don't know that they probably know by now what they really think of him this year. So that's all up to how confident that they are in him being able to hit MLB pitching.
I just worry. I worry about this team having to relying as heavily as they are on Nick Madrigal, who's a guy who's never been known to stay healthy, who's playing above his head here at third base. It makes me real nervous that if something happens, if he pulls up with a hamstring like he's wont to do at some point and has an IL stint, what does that do to this lineup?
Yeah, well,
better. Potentially, you don't know.
They can at least put Candelario at third base now, and they can put Bellinger at first base, and they can put Tauchman at center field, and then they can go back to playing Seiya. I mean, like Patrick said, at least you'd be batting him hopefully 7th or 8th. I mean, I worry that Ross won't do that, but
right.
I mean, hypothetically though, you at least have a lot of other good hitters in the lineup, and him probably lower than he has been, so it might not hurt you. And he's probably at least around a league average hitter, where it might not really hurt much over a month something worth of baseball games. But you are right, because I think Madrigal is incredibly annoying a lot, horrible base running last night and zero power and et cetera, but his skill set and his ability to put the ball in play when there's a runner in scoring position, or being able to hit any kind of pitcher, it's a nice, useful skill set to have to mix into the lineup, especially ninth. So he's played a really solid third base. So, but you're right, you can't count on him health wise, and if that happens, you're probably going to end up seeing more Suzuki again, and maybe more Patrick Wisdom again. I don't know. I think they might have kind of just moved on from that just because he's so extreme with his whiffs.
He is the home run leader on his team.
He is, yes.
It's incredible.
For another couple days probably, but yeah, he still is.
He should just bat ninth, and you hope that somebody happens to be on base if he hits a home run, because that's what it is.
He'll pop in a game once every 10 days and go 1 for 4 with a homer and 3 Ks. Might hit the homer off a catcher, but Suzuki's been known to do that too for his power.
Yes, exactly.
And yet, I would still say Suzuki. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased, but I still say Suzuki's a better hitter than Madrigal, all things considered.
He. I mean, he probably.
That's not saying much, but it's got. I just can't look at somebody with Madrigal with a slugging percentage, of 350 and like Madrigal, who also doesn't get on base as much as you would expect.
Right.
He doesn't walk either.
He should walk a lot more. He would do himself a lot of good to walk more, for sure. And I mean, I think this is probably. I'm hopeful that this is basically the bottom percentile of Seiya Suzuki. So I'm hopeful that he's at least at least a 330 plus OBP guy. I think he's still been that, but you want him to be slugging in the 415 to 440 range at least. I think he can be a kind of a similar hitter to Ian Happ, just in the way that he gets on base a bit and slugs some, but maybe not as much as you would like. But lately, he's not been anything like any of that. So it's hard to know, but I agree that Seiya's probably a better hitter in reality, and he might be a very good hitter in reality. We just need to see it first.
Fun fact about Madrigal, he has fewer walks than all but 2 Cubs. Those 2 Cubs are Miguel Amaya, who's only batted 100 times,
Yeah.
and Candelario, who's only played in 8 games, but is only 5 walks away from topping Madrigal. So
And
he's got half of
Amaya,
Madrigal's walk.
And Amaya has like 10 hit by pitches too. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So he does have 10 hit by pitches. So yeah, if you add those together, he's ahead of Madrigal. You're right. And then with Candelario, he's only 5 walks behind, but he's only had 4 games or 8 games to as a Cub. For the season, he has, of course, quite a few more walks, but than Madrigal. I just thought that was kind of funny that's how, just to put in perspective how little he walks. Candelario has over 4 times as many walks for the entire season as Madrigal, but I'm sure by the end of next week he'll have topped him as a Cub too. So, and for a guy who's kind of a slap hitter, you really do hope they get on base other ways too.
Right.
Yeah.
Pat,
do
you have any last questions for Matt before we move to wrap it up this week?
So Matt, giving you a 2-game head start, of which the Cubs are 1-1. How do you see the week unfolding? The Cubs have 6 games total. What's your projection on how they do this week? What do you think is a realistic projection? And then feel free to expand upon that in other ways.
Well, I hope that. I mean, I think you're hoping to win at least 2 more games. You're hoping to, on paper, you're hoping to win Game 3 of the Mets series, I think, and then you're hoping to get one in Toronto. If you get more than that, that is to me, that is a massive win. I mean, literally 2 wins, but 3 wins, I guess. But you'd feel really, really good about yourselves going into that August 15th plus stretch. Against teams that I'm hopeful that their offense can just score a lot of runs against and put away quite a bit. But I mean, this is going to be a hard week just because you don't know, like you guys have said, we don't know what we're getting from the starting pitching. So any game right now is just kind of, where earlier in the season, you could at least be like, oh, well, Steele's going today or Stroman's going today. So if we can score a couple of runs, we'll probably win. And right now, you don't have any idea on a given day. Starting with Kyle Hendricks in Game 3 against the Mets. If he's good, you'd hope that the offense can score some runs versus David Peterson. But I mean, the Jays series, I think, that might be the hardest series the rest of the year. That's just going to be a really, really difficult atmosphere against a really good lineup and with uncertainty of the rotation, especially if Drew Smiley or whoever's starting that 3rd game. So I wish I could give a concrete answer on this, but I guess I'll just say that I hope they finish the trip 3-3.
That's sort of where we see it too.
Yeah,
a 3-3 trip would be perfectly acceptable, I think, under the circumstances. The only downside to losing 3 out of 4 here, if the Cubs were to unfortunately do that, is I don't want to fall from. I don't want to go. I already think that 4 games over 500 isn't enough, but I don't want to be 2 games over 500 like that.
Yeah.
It's just it took so long to get to where they are that it feels like I don't want to do any more backsliding. I'm tired of backsliding. We don't have a lot of time for that.
Yeah, it's frustrating because that when there's so many teams involved in this race right now for them, with the Brewers, Reds, Marlins, Giants, Phillies, Diamondbacks. Where somebody's probably going to win on a given day and probably might win a few in a row. So you really want to avoid those stretches where you lose a bunch yourselves. That's the frustrating part because I think we have a pretty good idea of this team being a legitimately good team that is as good as any of these teams in the race, but you just can't afford that really bad stretch. Or else you're going to have to really clean up in the other games, and especially in head-to-head games against the Reds, Brewers, Diamondbacks, Giants, those teams that they still have games against. But yeah, I hope that like it wouldn't be that I don't believe in the team if they lose a few more games this week. It's just that you can't really afford a bad stretch, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm just hopeful that they find a way to win a couple more and just hang in there and then hopefully do a lot of damage against the bad teams.
Let's just run away with it, and then we won't.
Yeah,
well, that's it.
Yeah,
and we can play Mervis more down the stretch. And
exactly.
Rest people, and I like that idea.
Pat, are you on the 3-3 week as well?
I am.
Me too. Yes, I think it's unanimous this week. 3-3. We're rooting for the Cubs, and with that, we are going to wrap it up this week. Matt Clapp, always a good time. Time flies when we're talking Cubs with you. Always fun. Please remind our listeners where they can find all your work on the internet.
Yeah, just at thecomeback.com, awfulannouncing.com, and you can follow me for Cubs baseball tweets at the blog finds. Tweets or X or whatever you call them now. Yeah.
Yes, always great stuff there as well. So yeah, excellent. Thanks for coming on. Pat, any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
I'm just excited about watching the Cubs play Toronto like I was Atlanta last week. Let's see if we can squeak out 2 out of 3 on the road. That'd be awesome.
And with that, you can follow us on all of the social media platforms as well at Wrigleyville Nat, Facebook.com/Wrigleyville Nation as well. And we have a Patreon. That's how we stay ad-free on this podcast. Patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. If you want to support the show there, every single penny goes back to the show. It helps us pay for everything, keeps us ad-free. 5 seasons now we've been not having to hustle for ads, and that's thanks to our patrons who keep it that way. So if you want to support the show, that's the best way to do it. If you can't support the show financially during these times, we understand as well. Word of mouth is another way to support the show. Tell your Cub fan friends about the podcast. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast and continue to get all the content for free here every single week. WrigleyvilleNation.com with all the links that I just described. And with that, we're calling it a podcast. Pat, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.